Welcome to the Public Works Nerds podcast.
Welcome to the Public Works Nerds podcast, a public works podcast of the nerds, by the nerds, and for the nerds. I'm your host, Mark Culver. Thank you for joining us today. Today we're joined by two GIS nerds, Adam Carnow from Esri and John Shane from Bolton Menk. Let's start with Adam. Adam has been with Esri for over 15 years and has been working in the GIS world for over 30 years. Adam, why don't you just take a couple minutes and talk about your background and your experience?
Sure, and huge thanks for the opportunity to join and support your podcast and participate in it. I love the whole context and style of it, so happy to support it. Yeah, coming to you live from the Esri regional office in Charlotte, North Carolina. And as you mentioned, I've been with Esri 15 years. I'm in my third position at Esri. Started out as a local government account manager serving the Southeast here in Charlotte and throughout the Southeast region. I was a community evangelist for a few years, and then a couple of years ago switched over to our industry solutions team, which is industry-focused marketing, and I'm focused on the public works industry. Prior to that, I worked 15 years in AEC firms, 3 different ones in the Florida area. Grew up in Florida, went to the University of Florida. I have a degree in geography and another one.
Go Gators.
Yeah, a big Gator fan.
I'm not a Gator. I just said that for Adam's sake.
And I have a master's in urban regional planning. So that's who I am and how I got to be where I am today.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us. And looking forward to this conversation. Now let's meet John Shane. And John is been with Bolton Menk. He's a superstar here at Bolton Menk for almost, you just had your 24th anniversary with Bolton Menk.
Yep, I just flipped the calendar.
Next year, I'll get to buy you a drink and celebrate your silver anniversary.
I'll welcome that.
All right.
That'd be
put
great.
It on the calendar.
Yeah.
But you are the GIS work group leader at BMI. And so how did you get into GIS?
Luckily, I was just lucky, I guess. Really, I going to college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, like many prospective students.
Yeah.
I started out going down the computer science route. My parents gave me a good bit of advice in the late 90s that follow technology, follow computers, which I did. I got going in computer science, and it was okay. It was okay.
Yeah.
The first couple of computer science classes can be a little bit dry.
Yeah.
But at the same time, of course, I was, looking in a bunch of different avenues and stumbled into geography in a 101 class. And of course, they started to introduce some of the things you could do with geography. Of course, one is teaching. I knew I wasn't cut out to teach, although I've done quite a bit of teaching as the years have went on. But they started talking about GIS and being able to essentially apply some of this computer science that I was interested in to something that was a little bit more visual, right? And that really sent me down that path. And I took as many technical courses as I could at the time. So that's how I stumbled into GIS.
Yeah. And that was like the late 90s.
That was late 90s.
Yeah.
Late 90s. And actually, when I first started looking into GIS, it was really kind of mid 90s, right? So at that particular time, when I first started, I was into command line, Unix-based Arc Info.
Yeah.
And when I finally got into classes that, talked about Arc View, it was the 3X series, 3.1. It was just like, this is it. This is what I was really interested in. So
cool.
That's where it started.
Yeah, I'm in the same era. So I started working, a little bit before you. So I started working with GIS in 91 in grad school. And it was all command line on Unix workstations. And then it went up from there.
Right.
So, yeah.
And wow, look at where we are today. Could you guys even have imagined?
I think both of us are shaking our head in unison.
No way.
There.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. So let's jump into that then. So throughout the previous 15 episodes of this young podcast that I got going on here, I've heard so many of my guests talk about GIS and how it's transformed the public works industry. So today we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about how we see GIS being used in the everyday life of public works. where we're helping our clients, John, even, and Adam, where you're helping your clients tap into that tool. And then we're going to move into the future. And spoiler alert, the future is here. And I think I'm really excited to talk about how artificial intelligence, AI, is already a disruptive force in this industry, but how that's going to continue and really where we see this going. And again, like back in the late 90s, we never could have imagined where we would be in 25 years. So who knows what this is going to be in the next 25 years, but let's speculate on that a little bit about where this is going. So let's dive in. We're going to assume that our nerd community, if you're listening to this, you're obviously a nerd, knows what GIS is. But, geographic information systems, we're going to start with an assumed knowledge level that, you've seen it, you've used it. And if you've used any, city or county mapping interface, well, that's a version of GIS. It's using GIS information. But let's, John, how do you see GIS being used in public works realm right now? How are we helping our clients, with GIS?
Well, I would say this, that first of all, GIS, especially the Esri products, in my opinion, has become foundational to the IT stack, to the technology stack for almost every community.
Yeah.
And that being said, that it's much more accessible than it ever was. I'm not going to keep talking about 25 years ago, but when we talked about that one big computer that had all the dust on the top that one or two people could maybe operate, those days are gone, right? Now everybody has a device in their hands. They have multiple devices at home, working remote, in the office, and everything is delivered via the web, and all of these devices that we carry around. So, the types of applications and technologies that we're delivering people in a very targeted way has also changed, right? So the way that we're using, the way that we're analyzing data is completely different, but it's so much simpler and so much easier. Now, I would say that, for a long time, there was just a lot of data collection that was going on, right? Where communities and organizations were trying to collect all of the assets that they had, whether it was infrastructure or anything else, right? And those were being done with means of GPS and surveying methods. But now a lot of that data is collected for communities. And now we're in the mode that we're maintaining this information, but also enriching the information, enriching the data with new capabilities. And maybe we're looking at the data in a different way. So what's been really interesting to see now is how all of these folks that maybe don't classify themselves as maybe technical GIS or even computer users are now walking around and they're performing analysis and data collection on the fly every single day, with these units that are all connected out to the same data sources. And it's really amazing to see.
Yeah. So, just kind of getting back into the specific applications for public works, maybe talk about how, and we're going to have multiple episodes as this podcast grows, we'll have multiple episodes on GIS, but we're also going to have multiple episodes on asset management. So talk about maybe a little bit, and both, Adam, jump in too, but talk about how, GIS has become foundational for asset management as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, from what I've seen, GIS now becomes essentially that hub where all asset management applications are reaching into. And GIS in its own can do a very nice job with asset management. However, what we've seen is with maybe some of the other technologies that are leveraging that geospatial component is they're able to tie in things like work orders and get a really good idea of what the cost is in maintaining an asset through its life cycle, right? So we've seen web services being absolutely transformational there as far as being able to integrate GIS into their platforms. And like I said, there's a lot of good solutions that are just out of the box with being able to do, relational databases and tables and things of that nature to be able to track activities. But some asset management applications are absolutely taking it to the next level as far as being able to do preventative maintenance and tracking those types of things throughout its process.
Yeah. And Adam, I know Esri's got a lot of partners out there that are in that asset management realm. What have you seen that's really been impressive in that asset management world, where your partners are really pushing the limits of or the advantages of GIS?
Well, before I get to that, I'd like to start first with talking about the kind of the scope of GIS within public works.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
I'd like to lay that kind of context down before we get into asset management. So the first thing to understand is that GIS is a mission critical enterprise business system that can support the full range of public works activities.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to say it. Yep.
Too many people assume that it's great for field work, or it's great for asset management, or it's great for fleet or whatever, and they use it in one specific area or workflow, when really it is designed to support everything that public works does. And public works is a spatial business. I mean, everything it does has to do with location. So if you're not utilizing that location, you're leaving a heck of a lot of ROI in that data that you're paying a lot of money and time and resources towards to manage. So, and this is evident right from APWA. I mean, every year since 2018, APWA surveys its members, and they have like an NCAA basketball bracket to identify the top 5 tech trends for every year. And every year, GIS has been one of those 5 top tech trends. So the industry is saying, yes, we get the value of GIS, and it is foundational to our business. So that's great. But when you come at this as a GIS professional, which I am, you must put the technology into the realm of the public works professional. And so at Esri, we try to echo what APWA does. And so we look at the application of GIS to public works into 6 focus areas. And so those focus areas are operations and maintenance, streets, roads, and bridges, capital project design and engineering, field and fleet management, public grounds and facilities, and then emergency response. So those are the 6 kind of buckets where we kind of talk about the application of GIS. And so if you look at asset management, primarily asset management will fall under operations and maintenance, but it will trickle across a lot of the rest of those other 5 as well. And so the importance of location and asset management is just can't be understated, right? I mean, if you get a recall notice from a manufacturer for a certain piece of pipe and you got to replace all those, how do you know where they are, right? I mean, you don't want to start digging up and trying to find them and not know where they are. Or if a disaster comes through and wipes out a bunch of infrastructure in a specific area, how do you know what was there, right? I mean, you've got to have location as part of asset management. And so we've got a lot of strong partners. You know, Esri has over 3,000 partners across the globe in all industries. We've got a bunch that do asset management at different levels, whether it's, you know, enterprise asset management or work order management, all of that together. We've got some top-notch partners in that space, and they're all taking advantage of location. But you're right, John, in that you don't have to go out and purchase a massive system if you don't want to. There are innate out-of-the-box capabilities that ArcGIS has, where you can start to build asset management capabilities on your own very inexpensively, very quickly, with little risk, not having to code, and throw out some apps to do inspections, to do data collection, to do some rudimentary analysis to get going. So really, you know, we've had, you know, cities, towns, you know, 4,000 population that are utilizing our tools to do asset management in some shape or form.
Yeah, and you know, way back in the early stages of my career at the city of Maple Grove here in Minnesota, you know, we were managing our first real asset management experience holistically was signs, and we were using our GIS, our map for managing our signs, and there were new requirements coming in, you know, from the feds on retroreflectivity and that, and so we were trying to get a handle on what we had out there, and we had a really talented GIS analyst who was able to build us a little system where our sign maintenance guy could see himself on the map and know what sign he was next to. and just start using that like that. Well, Maple Grove eventually, did buy one of the big asset management systems, and they're using it for a lot more, but that was the beginning. That was kind of the start. And they just were using Esri, and I'm sure the tools have gotten even better since then, and there's a lot more flexibility in that if you do just kind of want to build your own system there. So I think that's really impressive. Maybe talk about some of those other, I don't know if they're templates or other things that users could use just kind of out of the box with ArcMap right now.
Yeah, well, not with ArcMap. No, that's dating.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, we don't say ArcMap around here much anymore. It's ArcGIS Pro. Right?
ArcGIS. I'm sorry.
Right,
yes.
right.
Yep.
So ArcMap is being sunset, and I know we have a lot of happy users with that, but time moves on, and it's time for everybody to move on to ArcGIS Pro. Yep. But yeah, so very important thing that people should know if they're ArcGIS customers and users is about what we call our ArcGIS solutions. So this is a collection of solutions that Esri develops with agencies. So we don't develop them in some back room, on a whiteboard going, I think we need to do this. We actually work with cities and counties and state agencies and regional agencies to develop these hand in hand using real data and real workflows every day. And we develop these applications, and then we put them out there. Think of these as an app store, and they're all free. Yeah. And we have over 150 of them, and there's about 50 of them, so a third of them are public works. But don't just look. If you go there, you can go to solutions.arcgis.com. You can look at the collection of them. Don't look at just the public works ones, because some of the ones outside of public works will be applicable. But for instance, let's say you need to do sign management, right? We've got a sign management solution. And you can literally check a box and say, deploy this in my ArcGIS online cloud organization, and it develops all of the products needed. You then start collecting data with the forms that are already set up. You can configure the forms to change them if you need to. You go out, collect the data, it goes right into the system. There's dashboards ready to go, everything all set up. So literally, in a day, you could have a sign management solution up and running and testing it out in the field, and getting the ROI. So the risk is negligible. If you do want to download it, you can deploy it on your own, on-prem system if you want to. But there's really very little risk. It's supported by tech support. When we come out with new versions, we're going to upgrade those so that they will keep working. So it makes your GIS much more sustainable. You don't have to constantly be editing code and trying to keep up with all the patches and everything else. It's just plug and play and off you go.
That's great. John, what solutions have we used or implemented for clients?
I would say those solution templates have been wildly successful, especially in the ArcGIS online environment. And, we've deployed several of them for clients, everything from, tracking homelessness and the unsheltered in place.
Wow.
All the way to doing citizen problem reporting, where we're engaging the public to be able to communicate where they're noticing where there might be some sort of maintenance issues. Yeah. But the ones that we seem to be doing most often recently, besides citizen problem reporter, are of course right now the lead service line sort of solution. And that's right now a very, it's a very current topic where we're trying to identify where all these are. And the great thing about the solutions is not only does it give those folks that are managing the data tools at their disposal, but what I love about them is they also engage the public, right? There's always a public facing component. And one of the biggest challenges that we had through the years when you're starting to put these applications and platforms together is, how do you also make this information available to the public and be able to scale it for many people to be able to use at the same time, right? So that's one of the things that we've been able to deploy a lot with the ArcGIS online environment that has just been fantastic. So, and Adam has kind of said, you have flexibility there because you might deploy something and 20 minutes later you have an application, but you might have certain business needs and you're still able to readily change it. So it's not necessarily just a black box, right? You are able to customize it to your own needs, use what you need, discard maybe what you don't, and be able to deploy something that truly works for your organization.
Is there a back and forth on that then? Like with these solutions, if it's been out there for a little while and one agency like really starts with this solution, but then evolves it into something else, is there then an opportunity to put that evolved, advanced solution back into the mix for everybody else?
Yeah, the team that runs that that program is very very open with the community, and they embrace the community and they want feedback. So yes, if there's something that the solution doesn't do that you want added to it, or you add it and you find value in it, give the feedback back to them and they review it. And if they think it's right, then they'll put it into the next one. Or if you have an idea for a brand new solution that doesn't even exist. So yeah, it is really a community driven program, and the team goes out of their way to solicit feedback from the users of those solutions. So yes, by all means, we want the user community to guide the development of those solutions. And so we constantly come out with improved versions all the time. I think they have quarterly releases. And so recently, like last year with a big release, one was we had improved our winter weather solutions. There was a big upgrade there. That's important up in your Minneapolis region. Yeah. And we'd worked with Syracuse on that, who is, they compete for the golden snowball, right, of the snowiest city in America every year. So definitely we want feedback on those solutions, make them better, make new ones, et cetera. And so that's great. John, you brought up the homeless ones, and not a lot of people know about that one. The lead service line is certainly a big one, but one that I'll also throw out there that won't come up if you say, on the gallery, only show me public works ones, is we have one for social equity analysis. So with this funding coming from the feds around a lot of infrastructure, some of the requirements for that money is that you make sure that it's equitably used across the community. And so we have a social equity analysis solution that will allow you to put a social equity lens on any discipline. So you could apply it to public works infrastructure investments and make sure it is equitable so you can get those federal funds.
I think as we talk about some of these different solutions in that, you touched on the homeless solution and the social equity analysis in that, it sparks a thought in my mind that, we're talking about GIS for public works, but I know in both of the cities that I worked for, we had really talented GIS staff. And of course, at some point that GIS staff starts supporting other departments within the city with their needs, because it is such a fantastic and flexible tool that obviously land use planning and, so there's so many other applications and solutions for community development and economic development and things like that. But then even beyond that, for police, for fire, it's really, it touches every aspect of city operations, and helping, produce some reports and analysis and assisting with operations and planning. So that's just something to note, that a lot of public works people end up becoming experts in some other realms within the city, just helping them out. And hopefully, they've got the resources to get their own GIS staff as well.
But there's typically a snowball effect within cities when when it goes really well.
Yeah.
Well, and a lot of these problems that the cities and counties and agencies are dealing with cut across departments anyway. Homeless is not just a problem in public works. It's a problem in public health. It's a problem in planning. It's a problem in housing. You name it. It cuts across everything. Law enforcement, code enforcement, all of that. So one of the great things about GIS is it's an integrative technology. It can pull data from all kinds of different sources and overlay them in a spatial context. So you can look at your land use and your zoning. You can look at your crimes. You can look at the infrastructure. You can look at lots of different things on top of each other and identify new things that you never really knew about before. So, so it's critical to solving the complex problems that these agencies are dealing with.
Before we transition into AI, I wanted just to kind of have a little bit of a conversation. And, I'm a user of GIS. And, I was a public works director for the last 8 years. And so I had staff that would, use GIS to get me data. I mean, I used to be a big, user of ArcReader and that to get stuff. And at some point I stopped even doing that. So I might not be up and up on everything, but when did Esri and ArcGIS transition from an app based or even a local server based type of solution or model to that cloud based model? And what does that mean for the user? Like, what are the advantages of that? You just maybe talk a little bit about that, Adam.
Sure. So, we have been in the business for over 50 years. And so,
Right.
When we started, it was, mainframe. And so as a technology company, we have to follow the trends. And so we are always, our R&D folks are always plugged into the bleeding edge of what's happening. So we're never surprised about what emerges. So as things changed in all things technology based, that's when we change. So, when, it used to be, individual, like John and I learned on the Unix workstations and everything on a local drive, and then it went client server, and then it went, as soon as the internet and the cloud became a thing, that's when we moved to it. We had to, because everybody was moving to it. And the really amazing thing that did, a lot of that, is that really opened up the ability of real-time information, right? So it used to be, if you wanted to collect information in the field, you had some sort of device, you went out into the field, you collected it all, then you came back and you actually physically plugged it into a computer, you downloaded it, and then you looked at it, right? Yep. So now with cellular networks in the cloud, you can have people collecting information and see it, near real time in a dashboard on a screen back in the office. So I can see where my field staff are. I can see the information they're collecting as it's happening. You can have live feeds from traffic cameras, and I can see an accident happen right in front of me and then alert people or whatnot. So that real-time capability, and then as these devices took off, everybody becomes a GIS user instantly.
He was holding up a cell phone for those that
are
listening. It's all right.
Yeah.
But yeah,
sorry.
Cell phones and tablets. I mean,
it's so everybody became users. And then the other thing that really helped with the cloud is the ability to make the GIS much more ironclad and enterprise ready, right? I mean, so it used to be you had to have all your computers in a farm and, stand up your app. And then like you would stand up a voting app on election day. And then, everybody hits that app and you could bring down your whole system. Well, now you can set that up in the cloud and it will automatically spin up more servers if needed or whatever. So apps don't go down anymore. And certainly with storms and, disaster recovery and all that kind of bulletproofing of IT has really cemented GIS as an enterprise level mission critical system, because it can ride all of that same infrastructure. So
yeah, I think that's
we have an whole episode on that.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. And I think that's a great example, and comes back to, like you said, that mission critical aspect of GIS.
And it also made it much more affordable and quicker and easier to use, right? You used to have to, create an application, a sign management application from scratch, and, hammer it out with some code and, stand it up on your own machine. And now it's literally check a box, it's deployed, and you go. So yeah, it's just revolutionary.
Well, the nice thing about it too is it fits a lot of different molds. So there's still ways and there's still reasons that you might want to deploy ArcGIS Enterprise on-prem.
Oh, sure.
Or maybe not even on-prem. Maybe you want to deploy it to your own cloud environment, right?
Yep.
So there's a lot of different ways that it can be implemented to your organization. ArcGIS Online I guess it would be considered a SaaS, right?
Yeah.
Is
software as a service.
Software as a service is a fantastic solution to get people up and running literally in 24 hours, right? To have something up and running and to be able to deploy applications almost immediately is amazing.
Yeah, and it makes it flexible and it's scalable and much more affordable to a wide range. But we're always big on, addressing the market in as many ways as possible. So we don't want to tell people, oh, we're now a SaaS company, you have to put it in the cloud, right? No, we will want to make sure that people have the flexibility of, putting it on a local box, putting it in their own server farm, or putting it on the cloud. So Esri's always taken that notion of make it as flexible or scalable as possible. Don't force people in a direction they don't necessarily want to go.
Cool.
Aren't ready for it.
So talking about, interesting segue, maybe you're not ready for this, but get ready. Fasten your seatbelts, because if you're not using AI now, you will be. So let's talk about that. Let's dive into artificial intelligence and what that is and how people are using that in the ArcGIS world. Hey everyone, I just want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsor, Bolton Menk, who is producing and editing our podcasts.
At Bolton Menk, we believe all people should live in a safe, sustainable, and beautiful community. We promise every client two things. We'll work hard for you, and we'll do a good job. We take a personal interest in the work being done around us. And at the end of the day, we're real people offering real solutions.
And Adam, why don't you start us off by maybe just talking a little bit about the difference between, say, like just a simple algorithm or a filter or something and AI? What is that difference? Where is AI going beyond just some maybe basic analysis tools?
Sure. So the first thing is that people should understand that AI has been around for a very long time. It's been around for decades, like since the 50s and 60s, as concepts, especially in the academic world. So AI is not something new, but it's becoming much more prevalent and accessible due to the advancements in technology, just like everything we've been talking, just like GIS, right?
The computers can handle it now,
right,
at a much more accessible level to the general public.
Right. So it's an echo of what happened with GIS that we just talked about, right?
Yep.
So it has been around for a long time. And then the other thing is that people think of AI, a lot of me growing up and watching the Terminator movies with Skynet, oh no, AI, right? We need to watch out for AI. But AI is this wide spectrum of things, and it shouldn't all be lumped into certain areas about we need to be afraid of it or danger or what have you. And so it's actually been in ArcGIS. We've had pieces of AI in it for decades. So you can interpolate an elevation surface based on certain elevation points or based on contours. That is AI learning and actually, estimating the elevation between the areas. You could do land cover, mapping based on aerial imagery. So you could teach the computer to recognize this is a forest, this is a road, this is a building, right? So we've had that in there for decades as well. So it's not new to GIS or to Esri, but some of the newer things that are emerging from it that people are hearing about and seeing more of are much more applicable and are changing things. And so while AI is the broad spectrum of things, when you start really getting down into it and talking about it with GIS and Public Works, you need to talk about the segment known as machine learning, where you can actually teach a machine to do something. And then you do that through deep learning models. So there's AI is the big circle, machine learning is within that, and then within machine learning are deep learning models. So if people want to get really nerdy, we can talk in that area. But so filter or algorithms are really just math, right? I mean, you can have a filter, this field equals whatever this, definition, show me those are, or I can have an algorithm that estimates the elevation based on these things. That's really just advanced spatial math or statistics. Machine learning really, or AI really gets into doing much higher level things like visual perception, like looking at a photograph and saying, is there graffiti on this wall, right? Being able to recognize graffiti in a photo, right? That's very advanced, right? Or speech recognition, right? You can talk to Siri or Alexa or Google, and they understand what you're saying, right? That's speech recognition. Another one is decision making. It can say, if this measurement goes above a certain thing, I need to send an alert to somebody, right? If you've got like a SCADA system and the pressure lost, okay, send an email to so-and-so because there was a problem here. right? And then translation, right? You can speak English into the computer and it give you back Spanish, right? So that's kind of examples of AI that we all should be familiar with because we deal with it in our daily lives, right? And so that's kind of the separation, how I see it, at least.
So, and just to kind of clarify, maybe I'm a little off base, but like, as you were talking about it and talking about machine learning, like every AI application has had some sort of machine learning component to it. Like there's been some sort of machine learning element in order to develop that artificial intelligence, right?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And now when you start talking about integration of AI with GIS, we use the term, and I think the entire community uses this term, we call it GeoAI. So when you're talking about spatial AI or using your GIS integrated with AI or AI within your GIS, the term should be GeoAI, and that's where you're dealing with a spatial component. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, and I had the opportunity to meet Adam in San Diego at the recent PWX conference there, and we talked a little bit about this episode and that, and I think we had a 10-minute conversation. Like we could have recorded part of this podcast right there on the floor.
Yeah.
But you started to talk about some of the applications and solutions that are being used right now that are using AI, and you touched on them really briefly. But why don't you go into a couple of them in a little more detail right now? And I think one of the more interesting ones was the ped ramp identification one.
Yeah.
I think that was in was that New England or
no?
Nebraska?
That was Douglas County, Nebraska.
Nebraska, yeah.
So where Omaha is, yeah. So when you talk, so we talked about AI and all that. Now we talked about GeoAI, and so there's three major ways that GeoAI provides value. The first one is object detection. So looking at objects from imagery, from videos, from point clouds. And so examples are like land cover or change detection, right? A lot of times like property appraisers, they can fly aerials, and then you fly another year and all of a sudden a pool appears in this person's backyard, but they didn't know it. So we need to up the property value because they have a pool now, right? So that kind of thing. So, but there's lots of things you can detect out of imagery, signs, fire hydrants, traffic lights, trees. You can have cameras, who is it? Hillsboro, Oregon, they're putting cameras on their street sweepers. So they're sweeping the streets every day. They're collecting pavement condition information. So you can now automatically have an AI routine or a model look at this imagery and pull out cracks or potholes or whatnot. So that's a big piece of the value here is this object detection, especially from imagery, video, and point cloud. And so the example from Douglas County was really interesting. And the story I love behind it is that, it was the GIS analyst that kind of changed things, right? Because they knew that they had to inventory all their ADA curb ramps across the county because they needed to know how many they had and, start the asset management life cycle with that. And so what were they going to do, right? They were going to send crews out into the field to collect them. And they had collected some as they were put in as part of projects over the years, and they had about 16,000 in their inventory, and they weren't sure how many they had. But it was so they turned to the GIS analyst and said, you need to set up an app for these guys to go out into the field and collect these curb ramps. And he was the one that said, wait a minute, let's try to think differently. Let's not use this muscle memory and do what we always do and send crews out in the field. We've got 1-inch, resolution imagery for the whole county, which is really good imagery. Yeah, they pay a lot of money for that, right? I mean, you need to extract as much value out of that as you can. So he said, I've heard about this AI thing. Let me see if I can get the computer to figure out if it can see ADA curb ramps in the imagery. And so he worked with somebody at Esri and started with one of our object detection models, and they started training it. And sure enough, part of it is just like teaching a child. You have to get them to understand what a curb ramp is. And so it's approximate size, approximate shape, approximate color, etc. And so like this is one of the interesting things that comes out is what's about the same size and shape as an ADA curb ramp, but a sunroof on a car. So it started pulling out all the sunroofs on the cars, right? So it's like, okay, that's wrong. So now we have to figure out how to teach it not to do that. And then the other thing is, it doesn't have to look at every square inch of the county. We know they're at intersections. So we can take only the imagery at the intersections and just analyze that, or portions of parking lots or whatnot. So you get more intelligent as you start working down this road. And then, some of it can't see it all because there's shadows, right? Or there's maybe things in the way.
Mm-hmm.
So, but anyway, it turned out that very quickly he was able to come to a model, and no AI is perfect. Okay. No AI is 100% perfect. So that's another thing to realize. There's always going to be some sort of human interaction, and there also needs to be some sort of data quality check. But he was able to get to know, 95% plus identification of these across the county, and it turned out they had 34,000 of them. They started with 16,000, had no idea how many they had, and he was able to do this on an individual PC running ArcGIS Pro, and the eventual model, when it ran and identified the 34,000 plus, it took about 12 hours. Well, think about, they did the math on how many hours it would have taken in the field for the crews to, and this is saving them months of staff time. So really great use case that applies everywhere, and I love it because it's getting more value out of that imagery, which you pay a lot for. So, yeah, great example.
What would you say is the average resolution that agencies are using on their aerials?
Geez, I don't know. I mean, it depends. John, you got any?
Yeah, I mean, typically in the Midwest now, that's been constantly improving as well.
Yeah,
and we're seeing a lot of data sets delivered now that are 2 to 4 inch.
Wow,
are pretty typical, and those are even in rural areas, right? So we're talking about fantastic resolution now.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah. And so, that is expensive data. So you need to look at ways to extract as much value out of it. And so AI is a great way. What can I pull out of that? Whether it's building footprints, whether it's pools, whether it's blue tarps after a storm comes through, so whose roofs are damaged. There's all kinds of things you can pull out of aerial imagery. Again, pavement markings and cracks, fire hydrants, traffic lights. I mean, you name it.
Well, and that gets into merging a previous topic of ours, and that's drones, with that as well. And
yep.
you touched on like a post-storm survey and going through and just taking drone footage of as much of the area as you can, and then do all sorts of things with that video, or that aerial, the imagery, as far as the tarps that you were saying, or trees down, or roads blocked, or standing water, or what have you. And maybe I would imagine that there will be AI tools to help you with those as well. So
yeah, for sure. Another great one on the public works side is impervious surface for stormwater billing, right? And stormwater modeling, right? And so used to be for a lot of agencies, they would fly their aerials once a year. So they would fly the aerials, right? And then they'd calculate the impervious surface for all the parcels, send people their bills, and then they'd wait another year, right? And then they do it again for all the new places. But what if the day after you fly one, a new thing is built? That means those people aren't getting billed for a whole year, right? Well, now, as soon as they get their certificate of occupancy, you can run out there with a drone. I can fly the property in 20 minutes, come back, start billing them from day one. And I've had agencies pay for their entire drone program with that one application. I mean, that's it.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's really, there's a lot of area for creativity and innovation.
That's a fantastic example, because that's exactly what's happening. We might be working on cycles of one in the best case scenario, sometimes 3-year sorts of imagery in order to reestablish impervious areas, and to be able to deploy a drone within a day to be able to get that information out and append it to the source data set in order to initiate the billing. I mean, that's a fantastic example.
Yeah. And that's another note. You get, I guess you said you did do a drone episode. Huh? I was going to say, you need a whole episode on drones.
We did. Yeah. I mean, that's not to say we won't do another one to talk about maybe some more specific applications, but we did do one. If you haven't heard that yet, if you're listening, if you hadn't heard the drone, listen to the drone episode. Go back. I don't remember what number it was. I think it was like 8 or 9 or 10, but right in that area there.
One of the things back to what Adam was talking about before with building and training this particular model for identifying pedestrian ramps, those particular models, those image libraries, all of those characteristics can also be shared and reused, right? And that's an important component too. So sometimes thinking about building a model from scratch can be a daunting exercise, right? So the more information, the more models are trained, the more information that becomes available out there for people to be able to leverage those is amazing. I know that not too long ago, we found a library to be able to identify passenger vehicles versus freight vehicles, so that we were able to run analysis against captured video to be able to do traffic counts, right?
That's great. And classification.
And classification as well. So, how many freight vehicles are coming through this intersection versus passenger and so on. And as those libraries get better and better, they're going to be easier to access and to plug in against some of those, foundational data sets like aerial imagery.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we have a collection of models that are developed ready for you to start with. So you don't have to start from scratch.
Yeah.
And then we encourage our user community to share theirs as well.
Great. So, just kind of on the flip side of all the benefits of AI, and I think you touched on this a little bit, Adam, but what should we be weary of when we're using AI, or someone says that they're using AI to complete a task? Like, what questions should we ask, or what should we kind of be checking on?
Well, first of all, and I just listened to an interview.
And I should have said GeoAI. Sorry.
Yeah, well, that's okay. I just listened to a really good interview yesterday on AI, and it came from the standpoint of Tempe, Arizona. They just released, they're one of the first municipalities to release an AI ethics policy.
Oh.
So they've been using AI. Tempe is very innovative, and they were interviewing their chief data officer, and she was talking about that policy, and it's got a lot of press since it came out. And I really liked one of the concepts she talked about. She talked about how people need to understand that AI is not, it should not be used in where you tell the AI, go do this and buy, you're independent and on your own. It's a collaboration between a human and the AI. So there's no way that ever you should just say, here, the AI can just do this on its own, of its own, with no balance, checks and balances. No. It's a collaboration between human beings. So the first thing I would say is, what's that level of human involvement? Is there enough to counterbalance any of the dangers that AI can bring to the equation, right? Because models are written by humans, so there's unintended bias, just the way our brains work in there. You need to make sure there's that. How are you reviewing the results? What are they doing with the results? What's that level of human involvement? Do you have enough of these checks and balances in place so that it's bringing the value, but none of the risk, or limiting the risk as much as possible? There's lots of opportunities for AI to bring value, but we have to make sure that, again, it's a collaboration, and it's not, we don't further any bias that's already built into systems or processes. And so here's another great example. So we talked about aerial imagery and extracting the curb ramps and so forth, but there's a whole nother area of imagery where you're using what's known as terrestrial imagery. So you can put camera on the side of a truck and take photos as that truck is driving, and then use that to identify things and actually, triangulate, and you can locate things. So like, I'm here in Charlotte, North Carolina Water Department, they were spending $300,000 to $400,000 a year to surveying companies to locate all of their water meters. Well, I hate to tell the survey industry, but they changed that. They put cameras on all the city vehicles that drive the streets every day, and they take pictures every so many feet, and that is then spooled up to the cloud, where it's analyzed by a machine learning model, and they can identify and give you the location within a pretty good accuracy of all the water meters in town. And they're saving that $300,000 to $400,000 a year. Tempe is doing it with graffiti. So they had a bad problem with graffiti. They put these cameras on the side of their trucks. Their trucks are driving, takes these photos. Once it analyzes the photo, once it finds one that has graffiti in it, it automatically fires off a work order to remove it. So the minute that tagger is done spray painting their graffiti, they know about it within a day or two, and they remove it, and it's revolutionized their fight against that. So
yeah, and before I ask John where maybe we've done some AI stuff, and I know one example where we're thinking of one, or where we've been talking about it, but I just wanted to touch on the water meter thing, because this always gets me. Like whenever I go to a place like San Diego or North Carolina or the Carolinas or Florida or something, and I'm walking the streets and I see this little cover and it says water meter on it, and I just shake my head like, God, how much easier would our life be if we could put our water meters in the public right away, so we didn't have to get into people's homes every time we needed to swap a meter out, or a radio goes bad on it or something like that. And so, for all of my fellow public works peers and our nerds in the cold weather climates, we just kind of shake our head like, yeah, God, that would be so nice. But anyway, just had to share that moment of awe there for the warm weather climates. But yeah, what have we done? Like, where have you seen maybe some of that?
Yeah. Well, I think I would echo some of the comments that Adam had before, where we've been using things that are now termed AI, that were essentially automation and running models. So we're very fortunate here to have very strong Python developers who've been able to aid us with automation of combing through large data sets, but also doing things like being able to interpret impervious areas and to be able to use, object classification to be able to determine, again, where vehicles might be, or open parking spaces, or, things of that particular nature. One of the things that I find really interesting right now is the use or the application of AI on top of IoT in real-time information. So we've talked about this quite a few times about what happens if we have real-time data coming in based off of flow, or how infrastructure should react to maybe a weather event that's upcoming, and what are current models, and being able to use AI to be able to adjust things in real time. And of course, all of those things are done with human supervision. I think we all need to understand that at this particular time. But to be able to implement that sort of intelligence into our system is something that I still think is going to be controlled mainly from a geospatial or a GeoAI type of a system.
Yeah, that's a great point, John. And I mean, I had notes in here, and if I had a whiteboard, I would do it on here. But one of the main drivers for the need for AI is real-time data and IoT sensors. And so the flow starts with, organizations have tons of data, and they've been spending a lot of time and money to manage it and collect it over the years. They're finally realizing that maybe they should do something with that data, right? And so organizations are trying to become data-driven, right? They're trying to make data-driven decisions. So if you then accept that this organization is going to be data-driven, then I want the best data that I can get to make that decision as best as I can, which means, okay, real-time data. So what are they doing? They're deploying IoT sensors, Internet of Things, whether it be, road temperatures or flow rates or flood levels or anything, whatever it is. So these things are streaming data 24/7 at some interval. Well, that leads to big data. And that leads to big spatial data, because one thing that every sensor has in common is a location. It exists somewhere. Either it's stationary like a flow gauge, or it moves around like a vehicle, right? And so these things have a location. So you got to use GIS to get the value out of that data. And that leads to big spatial data. Well, that data gets so big very fast that humans can't really effectively analyze it. And so you do set up the automated routines where an AI can start to monitor this, and then when it sees something going, it can then alert somebody. So that whole workflow and evolution of our agencies is leading to the need for more and more AI as our data gets bigger and bigger because of the real-time need from the data-driven decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like you said, we are collecting mammoth amount of data in so many ways, but how can we get better at analyzing it and doing stuff with that data? As we wrap up into the last 5 minutes here of the podcast, I wanted to ask both of you, where do you see GIS in the next 10 years? Like, what will be the next big innovation? And I think AI is going to be a part of that. Like we've been talking about for the last 25 minutes. But what are the next big things with GIS? Like, and maybe even on a stretch, just like I kind of maybe see something here, but where do you think maybe some big innovations there?
John, you want to go first, or
I'll let you go first on this one.
Okay. Well, as we do more and more real time, what we just talked about is going to become even bigger. But one of the areas that we haven't really talked about yet that I think is where the future of AI is in prediction. Right. So there's one thing with looking at a data flow and alerting someone to when something happens, or being able to analyze a piece of data, or aerials and pull out your curb ramp. But there's a whole new level of intelligence when I can predict based on historic information. So I can predict on where and when there are going to be traffic accidents. Right. I mean, that becomes incredibly important as far as, saving life and, property, et cetera. And so I think the prediction realm is really where you're going to see the growth, is as these models get more and more sophisticated, they'll be able to predict things. And now you start thinking about Minority Report, right? And then and the movie and predicting the crimes and all that. But
that is the second time in 2 days that I have heard a reference or made a reference to Minority Report. That's great. That's awesome. Keep going. Yeah,
it's time.
So, one of the ways I can example is I was talking to a customer recently. They actually have this model that this was in Florida, that the Army Corps developed a long time ago, and they want it updated, and it can predict debris volumes and types from like a storm before it hits. Yeah. So if I live on the coast of Florida, I'm a county or a city, and I know that a Cat 4 hurricane is going to hit this area because I have the track, I can run this model and it'll estimate based on, it knows what exists in that area, what kind of buildings and land cover, et cetera. You're going to have X cubic yards of concrete and X cubic yards of plywood and X cubic yards of down trees or whatever, so that I can then call contractors and get debris haulers ready in the area to go the first minute that storm is out of there. So think about how you think about resilience, you think about sustainability, the climate change. I mean, all of that's going to help us deal with the situations that we're dealing with. And that, to me, that's the value of that. Just, you can't even explain it, right? I mean, you can't even put a dollar on it especially when you're talking about disaster recovery or, resilience around that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think another really great example of that, and it's very related to what you're talking about, but, like anywhere, even in the non-hurricane prone areas, in Roseville, where I was a public works director, we had an area underneath an interchange, a low spot that would flood at a certain point, given a certain rain intensity. And again, I think using a tool that can even monitor some of the rainfall that was happening as it was happening, could send an alert saying, hey, you're going to have flooding at this intersection in 20 minutes.
Yep.
Some of that predictive stuff, and extend that to other parts of the city. I think that's huge, because you can go send resources there to deal with it before cars are driving through it and get stuck, or people are drowning somewhere. So
yeah.
Well, great. John, did you want to? Yeah.
Well, I wanted to say, as a GIS professional in the upper Midwest, where I see the next 10 years is there's going to be, I believe, it's going to be a lot more accessible to get real-time information.
Yeah.
More sensors are going to be able to become available.
I hope so.
And GIS is going to continue to integrate with all of these different platforms that spool off and spawn information to be able to consume that. Now, they've had tools around for some time, but I think that those things will become more easily accessible, where we'll be able to start tracking certain measures in real time much easier than what we're able to right now, and much less expensive as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's going to, you're going to start getting, going back to asset management. I mean, you're going to start to get predictions of failures of infrastructure, right, before it happens, right? You're going to know.
I hope so.
Right. That hopefully, before this pothole happens, before this water line breaks or whatnot. Because the more and more data, historical data you've got, the better your predictions are going to get. So over time, as the technology increases and the data gets more accurate and more frequent, you're going to get better tuned models, and you're going to get better predictions. So, yeah, the outlook, I think, is very good for this technology to bring even more value.
Awesome. Well, this has been great, and then love the conversation about AI and GeoAI.
There you go.
And I will never call it ArcMap again.
It's still supported for another year.
Yeah.
Before we go,
you.
Was there anything else you wanted to add?
Well, I mean, the one last piece of recommendation I would have for people, if you're not using AI right now, start immediately. Like the minute we get off this, the minute you get off this podcast, start looking for ways that you can utilize it, because lots of agencies across the country are using it and have been using it for quite some time, and they're getting lots of value out of it. And there are ways to jumpstart your path down the use of it.
Awesome. John?
Well, I just want to thank Adam for joining us and being part of a great organization that's really pushing tech forward, right? So without Esri, this conversation might be a lot different.
Yeah. Before the podcast started, I think we had a really great conversation just about how, you and stop me at any point, Adam, but we're in this environment, and Esri kind of exists in an environment that doesn't have a lot of competition. And a lot of times that can actually lead to kind of a stagnant environment in technology if you don't have a competitor that's pushing you. But I think I got to give Esri credit for really pushing themselves and allowing the users to push you. So thank you for that, and good job.
Well, as Jack Dangerman, our president and founder, always says, we work for our users. We don't have shareholders. Our users, we listen to them very intently, and whatever they need, that's what we try to deliver. So that's the whole theory behind this company that's taken us through 5+ decades. So,
yeah. Well, thank you for taking Public Works on that journey with you, and giving us a really, really amazing and transformative tool. So thanks again for joining us, Adam. Thank you, John, for your time today. And one last thing before we go, if you have enjoyed this episode and the podcast in general, we ask that you help us spread the word. If you're on LinkedIn, please like, and more importantly, comment on this podcast. And we're also on YouTube, so you can watch us on YouTube, see all of our pretty faces on video here. When John flashes the cell phone, you can see that. But hey, help us out, retweet one of our posts, repost it, or better yet, tell your colleagues about the podcast. Thank you. Nerds out.
Thanks.